They say truth is sharper than any sword. But what if the truth wasn't just sharp? What if it was deadly? Across the countless myths of ancient India, there's one divine weapon that rarely takes center stage. But when it does, the very fabric of reality seems to tremble. Not because it's the most powerful weapon in Vishnu's arsenal, not because it's made of cosmic light or forged in heaven, but because of what it represents. This weapon is Nandaka, the enigmatic sword of Vishnu. At first glance, it might look like just another divine artifact, a shining blade wielded by the preserver god in his cosmic battles. But behind its dazzling appearance lies something far more disturbing. Because in the hidden folds of Hindu mythology, Nandaka isn't just a weapon of war. It's a symbol, a philosophy, a warning, and some would argue, a curse. We all know Lord Vishnu's most iconic weapon is the Sudarshana chakra, the spinning discus that slices through evil with divine precision. It's everywhere in art, temples, and pop culture. But then there's the other weapon, the one he doesn't always carry, the one he only unsheathes when truth must cut deep. That's when Nandaka appears, and when it does, stories start to shift, illusions collapse, knowledge pierces ignorance. Not gently but violently, because that's the nature of Nandaka. In Sanskrit, the name Nandaka can be loosely translated to one who brings joy. But that joy doesn't come from comfort. It comes from clarity, from tearing away the lies we wrap ourselves in. And as anyone who has faced a hard truth knows, clarity can feel like being torn in two. That's why Nandaka's presence in mythology is rare but never trivial. It shows up when the stakes are impossibly high, when the enemy is not just a demon or a tyrant, but delusion itself. But here's the strangest part. The more you trace Nandaka's appearances through sacred texts and ancient stories, the more you realize something unsettling. Nandaka doesn't just fight monsters, it awakens the gods themselves. And the price for that awakening is often destruction. So what exactly is this sword? Where did it come from? Why does Vishnu only draw it in moments of cosmic crisis? And what deeper message was encoded into its myth? A message that might still matter in today's world, obsessed with comfort, illusion, and shallow truths. This is the dark secret behind Nandaka's sword. And what you're about to learn might just change the way you think about mythology, power, and the terrifying cost of enlightenment. The origins of Nandaka, not just a weapon, but an idea. To truly understand the mystery behind Nandaka, we have to step back, far beyond Vishnu's epic battles and celestial avatars, because Nandaka doesn't begin as a blade forged by gods. It begins as an idea, a concept. In Hindu mythology, almost everything is symbolic. Every character, every weapon, every event represents a cosmic truth or inner struggle. And Nandaka is no different. According to the Agni Purana and Shiva Purana, Nandaka wasn't created in a forge. It wasn't hammered out by the divine architect Vishvakarma like some heavenly piece of metal. Instead, it emerged from knowledge, from the very wisdom of the sacred scriptures, the Vedas. In one version of the myth, the demon Loha, a being of metal and ignorance, rises up to threaten the divine order. To defeat him, Vishnu draws a sword, but it's not just any weapon. It is the embodiment of spiritual knowledge. The sword materializes not from steel, but from truth. It's the Vedas themselves taking form to destroy falsehood. Let that sink in. Nandaka is knowledge, weaponized. Think about that for a second. In most stories across the world, swords symbolize power, violence, dominance. But in this case, the sword is meant to cut through illusion, to separate truth from fiction, clarity from confusion. It doesn't just kill demons, it dismantles lies. Now, compare that to the world we live in today, a world drowning in information, yet starving for wisdom. Everyone has access to knowledge, yet very few seem to wield it. That's what makes Nandaka feel so hauntingly relevant, because unlike other divine weapons, Nandaka isn't a solution for external enemies. It's for the enemies within: ignorance, ego, and attachment. And the act of wielding it isn't heroic in the traditional sense. It's painful. It's isolating. It's a commitment to seeing things as they truly are, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. And this is where Nandaka begins to feel less like a tool and more like a test. When Vishnu holds the sword, he's not just going to war. He's revealing what must be seen. He's stepping beyond the role of preserver and into something more radical, the catalyst of awakening. But here's where the story gets darker. In later scriptures, the blade of Nandaka is described as blue, glowing with divine energy, and so radiant that it burns the eyes of those unworthy to gaze upon it. Why blue? Because blue is the color of infinity in Hindu iconography. It's the color of cosmic truth, vast, mysterious, unknowable. The message is clear. Only those who are ready to see the infinite can face Nandaka. And for everyone else, the blade blinds. It destroys. In other words, truth is not safe. It's sacred. It's dangerous. That's the origin of Nandaka, not as a mere sword, but as a living paradox. The joy bringer who cuts deep, the symbol of light that strikes like lightning, and the embodiment of wisdom that can feel indistinguishable from war. When Nandaka appears, rare moments, the sword is unleashed. If Nandaka is so powerful, why don't we see it more often? That's the first thing scholars, priests, and storytellers often ask. After all, Vishnu takes on many avatars: Rama, Krishna, Narasimha, each with their own set of divine tools. But Nandaka, it almost never shows up, and that's what makes it so terrifying. Because when this sword does appear, something big is about to change. Not just a battle, not just a kingdom, but the very nature of reality. Let's go back to the ancient Padma Purana. In a cosmic age where ignorance has begun to cloud the hearts of beings, a massive demon rises. Loha, the embodiment of darkness, chaos, and confusion. Not just a villain, but a metaphor for all that blocks higher consciousness. No ordinary weapon can destroy him. Fire doesn't burn him. Arrows break against his body. The cosmos trembles, and then Vishnu appears, calm and radiant. And slowly he draws Nandaka. In that moment, the entire battlefield goes silent. It's not just a shift in power, it's a shift in reality. Because Nandaka doesn't kill the demon in a brutal show of violence. It disintegrates him, unmakes him, as if the very presence of unfiltered truth causes the illusion of the demon to collapse. It's less a murder and more an unveiling. Then there's another moment deep in esoteric texts where Nandaka appears in a dream, not of a god, but of a sage meditating near the edge of death. In the dream, Nandaka touches the sage's forehead, and suddenly he sees everything: his past lives, the nature of karma, the lies he told himself, the people he hurt, and the part of himself he'd never faced. When the sage awakens, he doesn't cry, he doesn't scream, he laughs. Because in that single moment of piercing insight, the pain made sense, his life made sense, and he finally let go. Nandaka didn't wound him, it freed him. See, this sword is rarely used, not because it's rare in power, but because it demands readiness. It requires a soul to be ripe for truth. And let's face it, most of us aren't. There's another theory among spiritual scholars that Nandaka only appears when preservation isn't enough. When the world has fallen so deep into illusion that even Vishnu's usual balance won't work. That's when the sword cuts through. Think of it this way: Vishnu is known as the preserver, the force that maintains harmony. But sometimes harmony becomes a lie, a stagnant peace built on denial. And in those moments, Vishnu doesn't balance, he disrupts. Nandaka is the symbol of divine disruption, not chaos, not destruction, but surgical transformation, the kind that hurts but heals. So whenever Nandaka shows up in a story, the message is clear. What you believed before is no longer enough. It's time to let go or be torn apart. And that's not just a message for demons or kings. That's for us. So far, we've seen Nandaka as a sword, forged not from fire and steel, but from knowledge. A blade that cuts not flesh, but falsehood. But the real question is, what does that mean for us? Why does this symbol matter beyond the pages of Scripture? Because when you strip away the myth, what you're left with is not just a weapon, but a mirror that forces you to see yourself in a way that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Let's start with the name, Nandaka, the bringer of joy. But that seems almost sarcastic, doesn't it? How could something that causes so much inner turmoil, that rips away illusions and comforts, possibly bring joy? But here's the twist. It's not the sword that brings joy. It's what's left after the cut. You see, in Vedantic philosophy, ignorance isn't just a lack of facts. It's a fundamental mistake in identity. It's thinking you are your body, your name, your job, your trauma. It's building your whole life on labels and masks until one day they're peeled off and you're left staring at something terrifyingly pure, your real self. That's what Nandaka is for, to do what most humans won't, to force the ego to surrender. Think of the sword not as a weapon, but as a process, a radical form of clarity. It doesn't whisper, it strikes. It doesn't ask you to let go, it forces you to. And that, in spiritual terms, is liberation through fire. This is why, in many tantric interpretations, Nandaka is held not just by Vishnu, but by the inner divine, the version of ourselves that's free from illusion. In these texts, the sword is used during self-inquiry, like slicing through the mental noise to reach the truth behind the mind. Let's go deeper. The blade itself is sometimes said to represent the viveka, the power of discrimination, not judgment, but the ability to discern what is real from what is false. In Sanskrit, the word viveka is tied to awakening, the ability to say, this is temporary and this is eternal, this is ego and this is soul, this is comfort and this is truth. That's why Nandaka hurts, because most people want truth, but they don't want what it demands. They want comfort with clarity, peace without pain, but real transformation, real awakening, it feels like a sword to the gut. And that's why Nandaka is feared, even in heaven, because what it symbolizes is not a gentle ascent to spiritual peace. It's a violent, necessary death of illusion. It reminds us that joy doesn't come from avoiding the darkness. It comes from walking straight into it, sword in hand, and cutting your way out. Let me put it another way. In modern life, Nandaka is that moment you realize the job, the relationship, the dream, it's not real or not real enough. It's that moment when a book, a conversation, or a brutal truth slices through your soul and you feel your old world fall apart. And in that instant, you're given a choice: cling to the pieces or pick up the sword. Nandaka isn't just Vishnu's weapon, it's yours, it's mine, it's everyone's, but only if they're brave enough to hold it. Why Vishnu rarely wields Nandaka, the price of awakening. If Nandaka is so powerful, a divine blade forged from knowledge, capable of cutting through illusion itself, then why doesn't Vishnu use it all the time? Why is it hidden, unsheathed only in moments of extreme crisis? To answer that, we have to explore a deeper truth. Awakening isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a curse. Think of Vishnu's role in the Hindu Trinity. He is the preserver, the cosmic force tasked with maintaining balance in the universe. Not too much chaos, not too much order, just enough of both to keep the dance of creation going. But Nandaka is not a tool of balance. It's a tool of disruption. It ends things, not in fire and fury like Shiva, but with a cold, cutting finality. That's why Vishnu rarely wields it, because when Nandaka is drawn, it signals a cosmic admission that things have gone too far, that balance is no longer possible, that truth must override harmony, and truth, in its rawest form, isn't comforting. It doesn't bring people together, it divides. Ask yourself, what happens when someone tells the truth in a world built on lies? They're not celebrated, they're attacked, isolated, sometimes even destroyed, because truth, especially when it's inconvenient, is the most dangerous force in any system. And Vishnu knows that. He knows that every time he unsheathes Nandaka, he's making a choice: to abandon peace in favor of clarity, to trade preservation for transformation. And transformation always comes with casualties. That's why even the gods hesitate. In some scriptures, it's said that when Vishnu prepares to wield Nandaka, even the devas, the divine beings of light, turn their eyes away, not because they fear the sword's power, but because they fear what it means. It means that the illusion is about to break, and that's something we all experience in our own lives. Think about it. How often have you known a truth deep down about your relationship, your purpose, your identity, but refused to face it because you knew that if you acknowledged it, your whole world might change. Your comfort might shatter, people might leave, you might lose things you thought were permanent. That's the essence of Nandaka. It's not just a sword, it's the moment of reckoning, and Vishnu, the cosmic preserver, doesn't rush into that moment. He waits, he watches, he gives the world every chance to evolve gently. But when it doesn't, when the illusion becomes too strong, too deep, too destructive, he draws the blade, and in that flash of divine steel, everything false burns away. What's left is terrifying, but it's also pure, it's real. That's why Nandaka remains mostly hidden, not because it's weak, but because it's too strong for a world that still clings to lies. And that's why the sword isn't a symbol of violence, it's a symbol of the price of truth. Nandaka in the modern world, how this ancient sword still cuts today. Mythology isn't just a window into the past, it's a mirror of the present. And Nandaka, as ancient as it is, may be more relevant now than ever before, because we live in a world addicted to comfort, comfortable beliefs, comfortable lies. We edit our truths for convenience, curate our identities for approval, and scroll through realities that have been filtered beyond recognition. We call it progress, but deep down, many of us know we're asleep. Now ask yourself, what if a blade like Nandaka were drawn today, not by a god, but by your own inner Vishnu, that deeper part of you that knows what you're avoiding, knows what must end, knows what truth you've been keeping locked away like a secret too sharp to hold? What would that sword cut through? Maybe it's a career that pays the bills but drains your soul. Maybe it's a relationship built on fear instead of love. Maybe it's the mask you've worn so long, you've forgotten who you were without it. And here's the hardest part. Most people don't want the truth. They say they do, until it arrives, because truth doesn't knock, it cuts. It doesn't ask permission, it enters. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. That's Nandaka's curse and its blessing. The ancient sages believed that every soul would one day be touched by the blade, not as punishment but as awakening. That there comes a moment when illusion no longer satisfies, when your spirit is ready to trade peace for power, comfort for clarity. And when that moment comes, you will not be met by a shining god in the sky. You'll be met by silence, by stillness, by a knowing, deep and terrifying, that you must become the sword, not to harm, but to cut away everything that isn't you. That's what makes Nandaka not just a relic of mythology, but a living philosophy, a force you carry within you, waiting to be unleashed when the time is right. And if you've watched this far, maybe that time is closer than you think. So the next time life brings you a hard truth, the next time your world starts to break and you feel like you're being pulled apart, ask yourself, is this the end? Or is this the sword setting me free? Because sometimes joy doesn't come from what you hold on to. It comes from what you finally let go of. Watching this far would be a waste if you don't watch this other video. Because if you think this sword held secrets, wait till you learn what's hidden about Sumerian gods and Anunnaki history and what that truly says about you on our next video. Watch now, link in description.